What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, guys, so we are going to do a full story video. A full story video is when I sit down and take a bunch of videos that tell one overarching story and combine them together into one big video. Now, today's full story video is going to be about X Factor, but leading into the X-Cutioner song. You see, when it came to X Factor around that point in time in Marvel Comics, you have Peter David actually take over the book. And for Peter David, he began using a completely new team of X Factor, a team that had actually worked for the government because the government was trying to build relations with the mutant race. And so all these stories that were written by Peter David takes place right before we jump into the X-Cutioner song. It's kind of like the prelude for X Factor leading into that event. So I do hope you enjoy today's comic book video. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we have now reached a point where we're gonna jump back into X Factor, but we're no longer going to talk about the original X Factor team, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Iceman, Beast, and Archangel. It's now time for a new team to rise up because the old team, they had rejoined the X-Men once you had Charles Xavier come back to Earth and help the X-Men take down the Shadow King. And so with those events happening, well, that leaves room for new characters to take up the mantle of the name X Factor. And so getting into X Factor issue number 71, being the first chapter for today's video, we actually pick up with Polaris, the daughter of Magneto, but also have the same ability as her father. We're also being introduced to Strong Guy as well. Now, Strong Guy has the ability to absorb kinetic energy and turn that energy as a way to help him grow in size, but to also enhance his strength as well. And we also have Jamie Madrox, the guy who has the ability to clone himself. Now, we do learn early on that this new X Factor team is being put together by the government, and I'll explain more here in a moment, but you didn't have all three characters realize that there's going to be other members to the team, especially one who's very close to Polaris, and that would be Havoc, Alex Summers. Because remember, in the early days of Marvel Comics, those two characters dated one another, but a lot of different things had happened over time, especially the idea that Havoc kind of moved on from Polaris and fell in love with Madeline Pryor, the ex-wife to his brother, Cyclops. But that took place back in X-Men Inferno. And now the question is, can these two characters actually get back together? Will it actually work out? But either way, we now jump over to Havoc. Now, when it comes to Havoc, we have not really seen him since the Extinction Agenda crossover, where you had the X-Men, X Factor, and also the New Mutants being able to work together to kind of free that country. Because in Genosha, you had the actual government there using mutants as slaves. And so Havoc stayed behind to begin the process of turning that country around and really begin to build different buildings where mutants in that country can call home, like apartment complexes, and the list goes on. Now, he is confronted by Val Cooper. Now, the Val, she believes that what he's doing right now is kind of like building ghettos in Genosha. Like, yes, you're trying to help out your people, but at the same time, you're putting them all in one particular place in this country. Either way, when it comes to Val Cooper, she does work alongside with the president, and she's kind of in charge of overwatching all superpower beings in the government. Now, early on in our coverage over the X-Men, she was the leader or kind of like a supervisor for a team called Freedom Force. And Freedom Force was a team of old X-Men villains, really the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants that were led by Mystique, who began to work for the government as a way to be forgiven for their crimes. The problem was they got caught in some legal issues on their last mission, and so Freedom Force was officially cut off. Now, with that being said, the president still wants to have a superhero team full of mutants that's working alongside with the government as a way to build a relationship between the government and the mutant race. But she wants Havoc to lead the X-Factor team. Now, for Havoc, he does not want to do that at all. For him, he's kind of done being a hero. But then out of nowhere, you have a girder about to fall right on top of Al Cooper. Now, Havoc at first does try to save her, but he is stopped by Wolfbane. And Wolfbane also stayed behind to help rebuild Genosha. But she does save Havoc. But Havoc is able to use his power to save Val Cooper. Now, after doing that, she says, look, that shows me that you can be a great leader. The way you act just at instant moments shows me that you know what to do when things get tough. And so he leaves with her, but also so does Wolfbane. But now we jump over to Quicksilver. Now, Quicksilver does arrive in Washington, D.C., thanks to Lockjaw, who has the ability to teleport to almost anywhere he wants to go. Either way, when it comes to Quicksilver, the reason why he had arrived in Washington is because he's looking for X-Factor. He got word that a new team is coming together and he needs their help. And so he's trying to ask different people in the area like, hey, where can I find the office of X-Factor? But right now, every single person in that area is freaking out. And the reason why? Because there is a bomb threat. And so you have Quicksilver being able to use his ability to run fast to find the bomb very quickly and make sure it does not go off by disarming it. But getting back over to Havoc, we do see that he had arrived back in Washington, D.C. along with Wolfbane and Val Cooper. Now, this is Val trying to convince Havoc to actually join the team. The man has not said yes just yet, but he's kind of like, I don't know if I actually want to do this or not. But that is the moment you have Charles Xavier and Cyclops walk into the room. Now, this takes place right before X-Men number 1, 1992, before we begin to see the gold and blue team when it comes to X-Men comics. Either way, this is now Charles saying, hey, Alex, let's talk because I actually need you to be on this team for a very good reason. Now, for Charles Xavier, the reason why he wants Havoc and X-Factor to come together is because, well, Charles realized at this point in time in Marvel Comics, the mutant race are being very heavily watched by the world. Because let's not forget, we just had the whole extension agenda in Genosha. We also had America try to pass 2 different laws, but one law was basically all about mutants. The idea that mutants should be registered. And lately, you had different organizations popping up left and right trying to get rid of the mutant race. The Reavers and also the Right, and the list goes on. And so for Charles, he said, listen, the reason why we need this government mutant team is to begin to build relations with the American government, but to also show the world that we mutants can actually work alongside with human people, that we can actually work together, but to also bring down all the hatred right now towards the mutant race and to hopefully fix things, but to protect our race from any future harm. And so just like that, it's Havoc saying, fine, I'll join this new team they are putting together. Now we're going to skip forward a tad bit where we actually see that Quicksilver have made it over to the new base of X-Factor. Now, when he does arrive, you have Polaris kind of tell us that Quicksilver does look a tad bit older than he usually did in the past. And the reason why? Because he's aging up. And here's the reason why. Somebody had messed with his powers. Anytime you have Quicksilver use a huge portion of his power, he will now begin to age up at a faster rate. And so it does seem like somebody is coming after Quicksilver. The problem is he has no idea who is trying to come after him. All he got was a postcard where someone said, "I did this to you. I planned this a long time ago to get back at you." And so for our heroes, they're kind of concerned about what in the world is going on with Quicksilver. Now, while you have Polaris, Strong Guy, Jamie, and also Quicksilver talking to one another, well, then you have Havoc and Wolfbane walk into the room to kind of say, okay, Havoc has now agreed to join X-Factor. Now we have a new team here. Let's see what kind of adventures they are going to go on. And really, their first adventure is one heck of a story, because we now jump over to Jamie Madrox going over to an apartment that he's currently watching right now for some of his friends. And so while being there, he does hear a knock at the door. And when he goes over to the door, well, apparently his guest wanted to kill him, and actually does, by shooting him over and over again. And our Jamie goes out the window and crashes right in front of the crowd of people outside the actual complex building. And so now we jump into X-Factor issue number 72, where we actually pick up with, well, a bunch of reporters right now reporting what just happened to Jamie, because he did just fall out of the window and crash right in front of the building, but he was already dead before he hit the ground because he was shot and killed earlier. Either way, you do have one reporter known as Ariel O'Hara reporting about what just happened at this building and showing off the dead body of Jamie. Now, the reason why we're focusing on this right here, because it is a way for X-Factor to find out what just happened to Jamie. Because while you have Val Cooper at the base just watching TV, she sees what happened to Jamie, and she begins to, well, freak out, because now one of her new team members was just killed off just like that in the early stages of this team. And so she tells Quicksilver, we have to tell the rest of the team what just happened. Now, the rest of the X-Factor team are just kind of chilling at the moment, but we also do learn a tad bit about the backstory of Strong Guy. You see, apparently he was not very close to his family, his parents, but they were killed off when a satellite had crushed them, which honestly is a messed up death. But after they had died, he was able to get money from the company who made the satellite, and he was living a good life until he had to pay back all the bad investments that his parents had made over the years. Now, he was able to make some more money by working for a rock star known as Lila Cheney. And really, we saw her in the early days of our coverage over X-Men comics. Either way, it's kind of him trying to tell us a tad bit about his origin. But then you have Val Cooper and Quicksilver arrive to inform the team that, hey guys, Jamie is dead. Like, they're right now reporting about how he was shot and killed and crashed in front of the building that he was staying at. Now, at first, for our heroes, they don't really believe in the idea that Jamie could be dead, but they do run over to the crime scene and they do find the dead body of Jamie. Like, yeah, he is officially dead. But while you have our heroes looking over his body, well, that is the moment you have another Jamie appear. He's kind of like, hey guys, so that is me, but that is a clone of me that was killed off. Now, for a brief moment, we are also being introduced to a new character known as Professor Vic Chalker. Now, this is kind of like one of those background characters we're going to see here and there throughout our coverage over X-Factor. But when it comes to the Professor, his main goal, like many other people, is to get rid of the mutant race. And that's all we know about this character. Now, getting back over to X-Factor, you do have Jamie explain what went down at the end of the last chapter. He tells us that really, when he heard that knock at the door, he knew it was too late for a guest. And so what he did was he sent a copy to answer the door. And of course, when they did, they got shot and killed by the shooter. Now, he did send another copy to chase after the shooter, but the shooter got away. Now, for Jamie, he said, listen, the reason why I didn't come to you guys because I thought the shooter would still be around. When I saw you guys, I knew, okay, you know what? Let me go ahead and inform them what exactly went down. Now, things do get a tad bit sad for Jamie. And the reason why, because usually he's able to reabsorb his clones back into himself. But the problem is he cannot reabsorb the dead clone right now on the ground. And he does get very upset about the idea of not being able to do that. And really, we're going to talk more about that later on in this chapter as well. Now, you do have Val Cooper trying her best to actually talk to the different reporters about what happened to Jamie. But while doing that, we actually shift our focus over to two characters who are currently hiding in the shadows. Now, these two characters, they're watching live television of Val Cooper reporting about what happened to Jamie. Now, these two guys, we do learn that they are responsible for what happened to Jamie, but also what happened to Quicksilver as well. Now, one of the guys, he is growing impatient about the idea of taking down X-Factor, but the other guy tells them, you need to wait. Wait for the right time for us to achieve our goal. But now we can kind of focus on the different members of X-Factor. Now, at first, you do have the team actually talking about the idea of doing a press conference to show off the team to the entire world, to say, hey guys, look, we have a new superhero team and they are called X-Factor. Now, before they're able to do that, they want to make sure that every single member on the team has a good enough code name for themselves on different missions. But I want to shift our focus over to Polaris and also Havoc because, like I said earlier, these two characters used to date in the early days of X-Men comics, but a lot of different things went down in a way where they were unable to be together anymore. For example, Polaris had her whole entire body being controlled by a character known as Malice. And then because of that, Havoc began to move away and kind of fall in love with Madeline Pryor. Now, with those two factors now being gone, it does leave the door open for these two characters to actually get back together once again. But now we have to shift our focus over to Jamie Madrox. And when we do, it's really more Jamie kind of expressing the idea that he's kind of concerned about the dead body of one of his copies. Because now he's beginning to realize that maybe there's a possibility that those copies out there that he creates have their own kind of soul. And so when they die, do they go to heaven? Do they go to hell? Where do they actually go? He feels bad about the idea that now his copies might actually be their own person, but they're getting killed off when he tries to use them against different enemies. But getting back over to Polaris and also Havoc, we do see the two characters being able to work together to save an entire family from a burning building. And really, it kind of shows that these two characters are beginning the process of trying to get back together for once. But here's the thing, while you have Havoc and Polaris kissing one another, they have no idea that they're being watched by somebody else. And that somebody seems to be Wolfbane. And the question is right now, why is she so upset when Polaris calls Havoc her lover? Now, the ending of the second chapter continues the whole idea of who had murdered Jamie Madrox earlier, or who tried to kill him off. Because while you have our heroes doing their press conference and answering all the different kinds of questions, well, that is when they are confronted by another Jamie. And he says, the one you have up there right now is the fake. I'm the real one. He's a copy of me. And now everyone is wondering in the possibility, could that be actually true? But as we dive into X Factor issue number 73, we actually pick up with Jamie versus Jamie. Now, here's the thing. Jamie is very similar to Strong Guy when it comes to kinetic energy, as the way how his powers truly work. You see, every single time Jamie is able to absorb kinetic energy, he is then able to make a copy of himself. And that is really important because while you have both Jamies fighting against one another, well, every single punch, they're making a copy of each other. And so right now we have all of these different copies just popping out left and right. Now, for the rest of X Factor, they do know a tad bit about how Jamie powers truly work. That if you are able to knock out the main one, then most likely all the other copies will go away. But the problem is, though, when you have our heroes knock out all the copies, you still have 2 left. And the question is right now, which one is the real one? Now, for the Jamie we saw in the earlier chapters, he truly believes that the other Jamie is actually a dark side of him that he had locked away to kind of make sure those dark thoughts or that dark part of him never comes out again. And he believes that dark part of him was able to break away and become its own actual person. Now, the other Jamie we saw at the very end of the last chapter, he believed the same thing, but the other way around, that he believes our Jamie is actually a dark part of him that had broke away. Either way, you do have both Jamies get knocked out. Now, like I said earlier, if you knock out the main one, all the copies go away. But the problem is, both of them still there at the moment. And so you have our hero say, you know what? Let's go ahead and take him back to our base to hopefully get everything figured out. Now, the whole idea of Jamie going up against, well, Jamie is actually a huge problem. And here's the reason why, because that battle took place at the press conference that X Factor was gonna have as a way to introduce a new government team full of mutants. And so with that happening, it makes the mutant race look bad because let's not forget, like Charles Xavier said earlier, there are a lot of eyes on the mutant race. And we now have more and more groups popping up believing that mutants are actually trouble. And so when you have this kind of incident happen, it gives the humans another reason to believe that mutants are actually a problem. And so you had that same reporter from earlier saying, look, this is another mutant incident. And you have Strong Guy get very upset because other heroes out there have very similar incidents, but you have the public forgive them very easily. The Avengers, the Fantastic Four, the Defenders, and the list goes on. But if they are a mutant team, oh, it's a huge problem. And this is Strong Guy saying enough is enough. And also, he hates the idea of even being called a mutant. Now, we do get another page where we do see Professor Vic Chalker trying to get something going as a way to hunt down the mutant race, that he was able to build some kind of armor suit. We do learn that maybe Vic is not all the way okay in the head because apparently he made the armor in the wrong way where he is unable to actually get inside the actual suit. Now, back at the base for X Factor, they're trying their best to figure out how in the world they're going to see who is actually the real Jamie here. Like right now, they have no way of seeing who's the fake one and who is the real one. And really, they asked Wolfbane to kind of use her ability of smell to kind of figure out who is the actual real one. But not even her can see who is actually the real one. And so now our heroes say, you know what? Let's go ahead and give both Jamies a polygraph. With that polygraph, we should be able to learn who is actually the real Jamie here at the moment. But at the end of the very last page for the third and final chapter for today's video, we actually see our mysterious character being really happy about the idea of going after Quicksilver, going after Jamie, but now going after Strong Guy next. And we'll actually cover that in the next video. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over X-Men comics as we work our way up to the X-Cutioner song crossover that we are going to talk about on my channel very soon. But before we are able to actually dive into that crossover, we got to cover some other stories that kind of lead up into it. And so today we're going to talk about X-Factor issue number 74 and 75. Now, before we dive into today's story, we have to remember that this is the second generation of X-Factor. The first team actually rejoined the X-Men by this point in Marvel Comics. And so you had a set of characters come in together to take up the mantle of X-Factor. So you have Strong Guy, Quicksilver, Polaris, Havoc, and Wolfbane, and also Jamie Madrox. Now, those 6 characters were able to come together because of Val Cooper. Now, Val Cooper works alongside with the president, and really, she's kind of in charge of dealing with all the mutants and non-mutants in the country to kind of see if the country needs to be protected by the superhuman beings across the country. Now, by this point in Marvel Comics, the president and the American government wants to build a better relationship with the mutant race. And so the president thought it would be a good idea to form a new X-Factor team that works for the government to kind of show the public that, hey, listen, we, the government, want to actually help out the mutant race. We, the government, want to work with them. And so you had Val Cooper being able to bring in those characters to make a new X-Factor team. Now, in our last video, we had actually talked about the idea that there were 2 characters who were trying to bring down different members of X-Factor in very unique kinds of ways. So, for example, when it came to Quicksilver, he actually went out of his way to find X-Factor to get their help because someone told him they did something to his powers, where if he kept using his powers, he will begin to age at a faster rate. And so for Quicksilver, his main goal is to figure out who in the world did it to him, but to also how to reverse it as well to save his life. But also, we had another incident with Jamie Madrox as well. You see, when it came to Jamie, he joined X-Factor, but then while you had the team doing a press conference to announce the team to all of America, well, you then had another Jamie Madrox appear, saying that he was the real one, leaving us wondering who was actually the real Jamie. Either way, you have both Jamies fight against each other, but you had X-Factor go out of their way to knock out both guys and basically lock them up until they are able to figure out who in the world is the real Jamie, but also how can they still save Quicksilver's life as well. And so right now the team is just trying to keep everything together, but they don't know that our mysterious bad guys, their next target on their team is actually Strong Guy. Now, this is also Peter David beginning to lay the groundwork for later stories down the road when it comes to his run on X-Factor. So, for example, in the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with Havoc just trying to relax at night, trying to sleep, except he's having a bad dream. And so when he wakes up, he's then confronted by Wolfbane. Now, this is a very creepy moment because you're now waking up after having a bad dream. And then when you wake up, there's some wolf girl in front of your bed staring at you, making sure that you are okay, quotation marks. Now, this is also kind of like Peter David saying maybe Wolfbane has a crush on Havoc, trying to bring in a new love triangle between Havoc, Polaris, and Wolfbane. Now, you have Havoc try to talk to her, but she's not trying to talk to him. And so she runs away, leaving us wondering what in the world just went down. Now, Havoc is not the only person having a nightmare. Matter of fact, so is Quicksilver. But it seemed like his nightmare has to deal with Crystal, who's part of the Inhumans royal family. Because remember, they were married. I think by this point in Marvel Comics, they're no longer married. And it's Quicksilver kind of having a bad dream about their own marriage. Now, the following day, we do see Havoc and Polaris kind of having a game together, but this is Havoc trying to tell Polaris what happened to him the previous night. The idea of waking up and seeing some wolf girl at the end of your bed is very creepy. Now, for Polaris, she does kind of joke around here, saying like, hey, you know what? She's a young girl. Maybe it's just a crush. You know, you are an older man, a hotter old man, and she finds you very attractive. But this is also Polaris kind of like, I don't like the idea that another woman was in your room staring at you so creepily and wants you so badly. And so we're going to see Polaris try to have a one-on-one conversation with Wolfbane down the road in the story. Now, like I said a moment ago, we have two characters who are trying to come after X-Factor. The problem was, in our last video, we had no idea who they were. With this page, we do learn that one of them is actually Mr. Sinister, and he's working alongside with someone else who's actually a senator in the American government system. And that would be Stephen Shafran. Now, Stephen Shafran is going to be really important for this story arc, but after this story arc, we're not going to see him. But we also do learn that he does have a certain kind of ability that I will explain more later on in this book. Just know that his power is going to be the reason why X-Factor is going through a lot of different things. But getting back over to the base of X-Factor, we do pick up with Val Cooper bringing in her ex-husband, and that would be Edmund Atkinson. Now, the reason why she brought Edmund over is to give the two Jamies a polygraph test to kind of see which one is actually the real one by asking them a set of questions, because the copy one will not know all the answers to all the different questions. Only the real one would know all the answers to all the different questions. Either way, you're going to have Edmund giving them a polygraph test. Now, while he gets sets up, you then have X-Factor get a message with someone saying, hey, I'm calling out Strong Guy. I want to see him at the Washington Monument because him and I are going to do battle. And so now our team has to head over to Washington Monument to fight against an unknown character. And so once you have our heroes arrive at that location, you then have our heroes meet a new character, and his name is Slab. Now, when it comes to Slab, this is his first appearance ever in Marvel Comics, but he has the mutant ability to change his size. And when he does, he also enhances his super strength as well, and make himself very durable as well. Now, for Slab, we have no idea why he's coming after Strong Guy, but these two characters are technically at an even level when it comes to power, because with Strong Guy, he's also able to enhance his super strength, but he has to absorb kinetic energy. Now, you have Slab tell our heroes there was a bomb placed nearby in this area. The problem is the only person who will be fast enough to find the bomb is Quicksilver. But let's not forget that Mr. Sinister and his new partner did something to Quicksilver's powers, where that now if he uses it, most likely he will begin to age at a faster rate. But the problem is there's innocent people right now in danger. And so unfortunately, he has to go ahead and use his powers to find that bomb in a timely manner. Now, getting back over to the base of X-Factor, we do pick up with Val Cooper and Edmund giving both Jamies a polygraph test. Now, with this polygraph test, they were able to see who could be the real Jamie. And we kind of find out it's not the one who had joined X-Factor. It's the other one who had basically appeared in the middle of that press conference claiming to be the real Jamie. He's saying that he is the real one and the other one is a fake. Now, that's pretty huge. But the question is that actually true? And so you have both Jamies say, you know what? There's one person who is for sure going to know who is the real one, and that would be Moira McTaggart. Now, I want to jump back over to X Factor at the Washington Monument, as you have Strong Guy fighting against Slab. Now, while you have the two characters fighting, let's not forget that Strong Guy does get stronger and stronger when he does absorb kinetic energy. And that's really important for this section right here. And here's the reason why. You see, he's not holding back. And so when he tries to take out Slab, he does miss a punch. And that punch does hit Washington Monument, destroying the entire thing. And then Slab is able to get away just like that. And so now it does look like that X Factor had just destroyed Washington Monument. Really, Strong Guy did. Now, when it comes to Havoc, his main goal is to help out the innocent people who may be hurt by the collapsed building, except that is when they are confronted by, well, the bad guy, the Senator, and that would be good old Steven Shafran. He said, hey, you guys are arrested because what you guys did is completely wrong. But as we dive into X Factor issue number 75, the big 75th issue, we are then introduced to a new group that's not really around a lot in Marvel Comics, and that would be the Nasty Boys. Now, the Nasty Boys on their own, they do appear many times in Marvel Comics, but as their group, the Nasty Boys, they only appear about 6 times. Now, this team was actually put together by Mr. Sinister to be his own personal strike team, and really he also walks into the room that he had gave them, and unfortunately the Nasty Boys are actually nasty to the point where they have mold growing out of their floors in their apartment or whatever. Either way, on the Nasty Boys you have Slab, Gorgeous George, Hairbag, Ramrod, Ruckus. Yeah, that's their names. It's honestly pretty wild. But either way, like I said, these guys are Sinister's strike team, and he's going to use them as a way to go after X Factor. Now, when he does walk into their apartment, he does see them watching the news about what happened to Strong Guy, how he was arrested, but Val Cooper was able to get him out of jail. Now, we also see the Senator also talking about what the mutants did to the Washington Monument. And so for Sinister, we kind of get the idea that he has plans going on that he is not sharing with his partner, the Senator. Now for Strong Guy, he actually wants to leave the team because this man was arrested, fingerprinted, and basically treated like a criminal, even though he was battling against a villain who had called him out, who had put people's lives in danger. Now for Havoc, he does tell Strong Guy, hey, don't leave the team. Let's stick together and try to figure out who is actually behind this. And so you have Strong Guy agree, but it's kind of like, hey, you better hurry up because I'm telling you, sooner or later, I'm out of here. But now we jump over to Ramrod and Ruckus, 2 members of the Nasty Boys. Now for me personally, I kind of like Ruckus, and the reason why, because he has the ability to absorb sound energy and release it as a concussive force. Kind of cool to me a tad bit. Now for Ramrod, well, he has the ability to make wooden material longer, hence the name Ramrod. Yeah, that's his power. Either way, the 2 guys on a beer run, but they have no money to pay for their beers. So they cause some trouble in the store they were trying to buy the beer from. Most likely killing the guy off to get the beer for free. Now, getting back over to our heroes at the base of X Factor, we do see them on call with Moira Tagger. Now, when it comes to Moira Tagger, by this point in our coverage over X-Men comics, she's no longer a bad guy, no longer being controlled by the Shadow King. She's now back to normal. Now, the reason why they called her, because for a while there, Jamie Madrox was actually staying with Moira Tagger on Muir Island, but then out of nowhere, he just left. And of course, he joined X Factor. But the reason why they're calling her is because one of the Jamies, the one that appeared in the middle of our story in our last video, the one that did not join X Factor, had said, listen, only one person knows about this certain thing I used to do back on Muir Island. And of course, only Moira Tagger knows about it. And so when you have Moira Tagger confirm that what that Jamie is saying is true, it now proves that the other Jamie, the one that had joined X Factor, is actually a fake, a copy. And so now the real Jamie, the one that appeared in the middle of our last story, will now have to use his ability to reabsorb the other Jamie, the copy. Now, the one that did join X Factor, he cannot believe in the idea that you have all this evidence right now being laid out in front of him to say that he is the fake one, that he is not the real one. He can't believe it, but unfortunately, he has to. Now you do have everybody leave the room to kind of allow both of the Jamies to actually sit down with one another to kind of talk things out, where you have the supposed real Jamie say like, hey, I know it sucks that you believed that you were the original one, but now you know that you are not the original one. That now you know I am the real Jamie Madrox. And so you have this suit wearing one begin the process of absorbing the one that had joined X Factor. And just like that, he's gone. Now, the way he is drawn here, we're kind of left to believe that he's actually evil because the evil smile on his face. And so now we kind of know that maybe that is not the real Jamie, but we just saw him absorb the other one. So it's kind of like, is it really him or not? Is he the real one or the fake one? Now, the next page kind of tells us a lot going on behind the scenes. So when it came to Val Cooper, when she had brought her ex-husband Edmund, that was not her ex-husband at all. Matter of fact, it was Sinister pretending to be him to kind of help out with his plan. But then on top of that, when it comes to Jamie, well, he does leave the actual base of X Factor and gets in the vehicle along with Mr. Sinister. So now we know that this Jamie is working alongside with him. Now, we're going to shift our focus over to Quicksilver just for a quick second. And the reason why, because you have a doctor right now trying to run some tests on him. And you have the doctor tell everyone in the room that Quicksilver is perfectly fine. Like, he's at perfect health. The only thing he's worried about Quicksilver is that he may be just stressed out and he needs to relax. And that's really it. But for Quicksilver, he cannot believe that because, again, he came to X Factor believing that someone had altered his powers in a way where if he does use them, he is going to age up. But the doctor says, no, you are perfectly fine. And he leaves. But now I want to jump over to Sinister, who heads over to the home of the Nasty Boys. But he also brings Jamie and also the Senator as well. And here is the reason why. He wants everybody to get the chance to know one another. But we do learn that this Jamie is actually a copy, not the real one. So let me explain. The real Jamie got absorbed earlier. This one is a copy that broke away but stayed behind the scenes to make sure that the real Jamie forgot about its copy. Now, here's the catch though, because we learned in our last video that only the original Jamie has the ability to absorb all the copies. Now, a copy may absorb a copy, but a copy cannot absorb the original Jamie. Well, this one did. And so we're kind of left to wonder, how does his powers truly work? Now, we also see the Nasty Boys meeting the Senator as well. And we do learn that he has the ability to kind of change things around him. Let me explain. You see, when it comes to the Senator, he has the ability to change the outcome of different kinds of situations around him. So for example, if he decided one day that he wanted to run for president, well, he could do that. And matter of fact, he'll be able to shift the election into his favor. Or let's say that he wants everyone to believe that a certain person is guilty, like Strong Guy. He is able to alter their minds to make those people actually believe that Strong Guy is actually guilty. And so he could use that power on almost anybody. And so his goal right now is to, well, use it on the president next. Now, there is another character we have to talk about, and that'll be Vic Chalker. Now, Vic Chalker is this professor we have been seeing in the earlier chapters over Peter David X Factor, where this professor is plotting to go after the mutant race. And so he had created some kind of exoskeleton suit to use against the mutant race. The problem is, every single time he believes that he had actually finished the project, something else goes wrong with it. Now, I want to shift our focus over to Polaris and Wolfbane, because you do have Polaris kind of confront Wolfbane about what she did to Havoc in the last chapter. Now, for Wolfbane, she's kind of pretending that she has no idea what Polaris is talking about. So it does kind of seem like Peter David is trying to bringing the whole idea of a love triangle between Polaris, Havoc, and also Wolfbane. Now, while you have the two ladies talking, the rest of the team arrive, and they realize that it must be somebody out there who has the ability to turn different kinds of situations in their favor against X-Factor. And so our heroes, they're trying to figure out who it could possibly be. But now we have to jump back over to the Nasty Boys' home. Now, I want to shift our focus onto the fake Jamie, because out of nowhere, he begins to get absorbed inside. Like his body goes in and then pops out the real Jamie, the one that had joined X-Factor. He had learned the ability to allow a copy to absorb him, but then of course break free when the time comes for him to break free. And so because of that, he was able to learn everything that was going on with Sinister, the Nasty Boys, and also Mr. Sinister as well. And so you have the real Jamie being able to just get the heck out of there. He's able to break away, and the Nasty Boys are wondering why Mr. Sinister did not stop Jamie from getting away. He said, listen, I wanted him to escape. I wanted him to hopefully go over to the Capitol to confront the senator while he gives his speech against the president. It's all part of my master plan. Now you have Jamie being able to arrive at the Capitol, and when he does, his main goal is to make sure that everyone at the Capitol know that it was Stephen Shaffran who was using his powers as a way to make X-Factor look bad. Now, of course, you do have the Nasty Boys arrive there to fight against Jamie, to make sure that he is not able to tell anybody at the Capitol. But luckily for Jamie, the rest of X-Factor arrived just in time to actually stop the Nasty Boys. And so you do have Jamie being able to confront Steven, where he does announce that it was him using his ability in a way to turn things into his favor, because he hates the idea of the president trying to push this agenda where the American government is going to work with the mutant race. It sounds horrible to him. But either way, you have Steven being able to fly away. But when he does, he said, listen, I am going to spread the word about my whole idea, the idea of the president, and you mutants should not be in our government system at all. And he flies away. But at the very end of the book, we do learn that that was actually Mr. Sinister pretending to be Stephen Shaffran, the senator. And here is the reason why. So he heard that when it came to the senator, he had the ability to turn things into his favor. And he was going to use that ability as a way to become president. And then push this agenda where you're going to have the American government turn their backs on the mutant race, which would then make things even harder for the mutants across the country. And so for Mr. Sinister, he could not allow that at all, because to him, he needs the mutants to still have free range to run all his different projects. But also, he got afraid about the idea that Steven might go after Havoc. And for Mr. Sinister, Havoc is needed for his plans down the road. Just like Cyclops and Jean Grey were, Havoc is on his list. And so then you have Mr. Sinister go ahead and kill off Steven to wrap up today's story. What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but things are going to be a tad bit different. Let me explain. You see, in the early 1990s, Peter David took over the X-Factor book, but at that same time, he was also writing the Hulk. And so he thought it would be a great idea to have a crossover. You see, in the 90s, there were a lot of crossovers. Matter of fact, we had just covered the X-Men and Ghost Rider one. Either way, it's now time for the Hulk and also X-Factor. Now, really, this is more of a Hulk story, but X-Factor does have a chapter that does go into the middle of this 3-part story arc that takes place over in the Incredible Hulk book. Now, there are a few things we have to talk about, like, for example, the whole idea of what was going on with the Hulk. So let me explain. You see, around this time in Marvel Comics, the Hulk was going through a lot because in the mind of Bruce Banner, there were 3 different personas. You had Bruce, you had Savage Hulk, and you also had the Gray Hulk. Now, the Gray Hulk and Savage Hulk, they were fighting for control, but thankfully, thanks for Dr. Samson, he was able to take all 3 personas and kind of merge them together to make a new persona, a Hulk that is actually smart, an intelligent Hulk. And so it kind of gives us the ability to see a new kind of Hulk out there in the world of Marvel Comics. But now we have to talk about the Pantheon. Now, the Pantheon was a group of people who were actually descendants to a certain god. Now, this god, his actual name was Val Halfling. Now, Val Halfling is an Asgardian, half human, but also he is the son of Loki. Now, the Pantheons, like I said, they are his descendants, but they were an actual group that were based in Nevada. And around this time in Marvel Comics, the Hulk was actually working alongside with them. And really, we're going to see them here and there in this actual story arc. But for the Hulk, he's also staying with them at their base called the Mount. And again, that is based in Nevada. And so now we are able to actually dive into the storyline where we pick up with Hulk issue number 390. Now, we have to jump over to a country called Trans-Sabal, and I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, this country is unfortunately going through a civil war. And here's the thing, the people are trying to bring down their leader, a guy known as Fernok Don. And Fernok is going to be very important for, well, today's video. Now, with all that being said, well, you see, the leader was able to call in some help from America, and America has sent over some Mandroid armor suits. Now, Mandroids, like I said, are armored suits that can be worn in battle, and so these suits are really powerful. But the resistance, the people who are trying to bring down their leader, well, they have an anti-armor cannon, but the problem is the cannon was knocked off its actual mount, and so right now, unfortunately, the people are about to lose this battle against the leader's army. But luckily for the people who are trying to fight back, they get some help. And that help would be the Hulk. Now, the reason why the Hulk is here is going to be explained to us down the road later in this video, but the reason why he's here right now, we can say, is that he's here to help out because the Pantheons, that new group he joined, also wanted to help out. Now, we do see that one of the members of the Pantheons is actually here, and that would be Hector. Now, Hector is knocked out mid-battle, but luckily for Hector, Rick Jones is there to wake him up. And so you have Hector and Rick being able to jump back into the battle with the Hulk to hopefully bring down the army of Trans-Sabal to help the resistance fight back against the people who are trying to bring them down. Now, we actually jump over to Fernok, and we see Fernok just kind of entertaining his guests while there's a huge battle taking place in his country. Now, we do learn, really, we already did find out earlier, that he is getting his special equipment, his weapons from America. But it seems like the reason why he's able to get his hands on those weapons is because of a certain CIA agent known as Gavin. Now, when it comes to Gavin, he does not really like Fernok, but at the same time being forced to work with him. Now, you do have Gavin Gavin walk out of the room for a brief moment, but that is when he is confronted by one of his assistants who tells him like, hey, we got a big problem right now. And unfortunately, that big problem is a big green monster, better known as the Hulk. Now, back over to the battlefield, we do see the Hulk being able to do a huge number to the army of Fernok. Like, the Hulk is taking down all these different battle armor suits. Now, he does have some help from the Pantheons as well. More members of that group right there does appear to help out. But after a few more pages of the battle, we do see Rick and one of the other members of the Pantheons go to examine one of the Mandroid armor suits. And that is when they find out that this Mandroid armor suit came from S.H.I.E.L.D., came from America. And so for Rick Jones and the Pantheons, they're kind of like, what in the world have we gotten ourselves into at this moment? And so that is when we get a flashback where we have Rick stopping by the base of the Pantheons, better known as the Mount. Now, when he stops by there, it's really him trying to give Bruce Banner a gift. And this gift is actually a pair of, well, bunny slippers from Betty, because at this time in Marvel Comics, they were actually married. Now, you didn't have Hulk wanting to show Rick what's going to be his next mission. And so you have Hulk walk Rick over to, well, the med lab, where we see a bunch of victims currently being treated. Now, these victims came from the war over in Trans-Sabal, the war in the present day where you have the Hulk fighting in at the moment. And so you have Hulk telling Rick in this flashback that him and the Pantheons had agreed to go over to that country and to remove their leader, because right now this war, it has to stop. Innocent people are being killed off, and people are starving and dying in that country while the leader is truthfully not trying to make things better for everybody. Now, for Peter David, there is a plot line going on with the whole idea of who is Rick's biological parents, because we kind of find out that with Betty Ross working at a hotline at this time in Marvel Comics, she gets a call from somebody, and if somebody's name is Jacqueline, and I'm going to most likely mispronounce the last name, Shore. And apparently she is claiming to be the mother to Rick Jones. Now that is pretty huge. But getting back over to Fernok and also the CIA agent known as Gavin, they're kind of wondering like, okay, how in the world are we going to handle this Hulk problem? And that leads into him saying, you know what, I think I have an idea, because we do have a new kind of task force that could most likely deal with the Hulk. And of course, he is talking about X-Factor. Now, in the opening pages of Hulk issue number 391, we do pick up with Rick Jones. Now, this is Rick Jones telling the Hulk that he feels like that the Hulk in the Pantheon group is actually on the wrong side here. Let me explain. So what he is saying is that when they found the Mandroid armor suits earlier, they realized those suits were created by S.H.I.E.L.D. And of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. works for America. And so for Rick, it's kind of like, why would America help out the bad guys? Like, wouldn't America help out the good guys? And if you're saying that the people who are trying to fight against their leader is actually good and their leader is bad, then again, why would America be helping him? And so now is Rick saying, I feel like we may be on the wrong side here. Now for the Hulk, he's kind of like, no, there's no way that we're on the wrong side here. But hey, listen, I'm hoping that sooner or later, the picture will be clear for you to hopefully help you understand that we have chosen the right side here. Jump over to X-Factor, and real quickly, I kind of want to explain how things are going for X-Factor around this time in Marvel Comics. You see, for X-Factor around this time, after the original team had rejoined the X-Men, you had Val Cooper and the US government agree to make a new X-Factor team that would work for the government as a way to build relations between the government of the US and also the mutant race. And so, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of times where X-Factor is going to be involved in some, government issues like this one. Now, Now, when they do arrive in the country, they are confronted by Galvin, the CIA agent, and also Farnock, where you do have the two characters explain what's happening in the country. The whole idea that right now there are a group of people who are wanting their leader gone from the country, and the US has to help out Farnock because their country is allies with the US. But on top of that, now they have to deal with the Pantheon group in the Hulk, a vigilante group to Galvin. Now for X-Factor, they kind of know that the US kind of being forced to help out because again, they're allies with this country, but at the same time, Havoc realized that Farnock is not really a good leader because he has heard what's really happening in this country. But again, X-Factor works for the US government. They have no choice here. They have to help out. Now, I want to jump back over to the Hulk and also the Pantheon group as they're trying to plot out how they're going to actually help the Resistance fight against Farnock and his army and remove him as the leader of this country. Now, while you have the Hulk and also the Pantheon group trying to figure that out, I want to shift our focus over to Rick because Rick Jones is walking around the area where he is able to talk to a guy known as, well, Shirk. And I really hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, for Shirk, he does explain why he had joined the Resistance, that his father was killed and then his mom had committed suicide because, well, what they had done to her, but what they had done to his father as well. And so for Rick Jones, it's kind of him getting a better idea of who is actually the good guys here. And right now, it does seem to be the Resistance. But now it's time for us to get into the whole idea of this crossover. So you have the Hulk once again leading the Resistance against the army of Farnock. Now, while doing that, at first, it does seem like they're about to actually win the battle because the Hulk is able to just run through all the different weapons that Farnock army have brought over with them to hopefully bring down the Hulk. But then in the middle of the battle, you have the Hulk get blasted out of nowhere. And this leads into, well, you already know what's about to happen right now. The Hulk is about to fight against X-Factor. Now, you do have X-Factor being able to do some damage to the Hulk, but really the battle does shift its focus over to the Hulk versus Havoc. Now, while you have Havoc trying to use his full power to bring down the Hulk, you have the Pantheon group going ahead to move on to the palace to hopefully bring down their leader. Except when they do arrive at the palace, well, there's a huge explosion. And that kind of tells us that explosion came from Havoc fighting against the Hulk. But now the question is, did the Hulk survive? Did X-Factor survive as well? That is the big question as we go into the third chapter, which leads over to X-Factor issue number 76. But now we have to jump over to X-Factor issue number 76. Now, as we do, we actually pick up with Wolfbane. Now, guys, remember Wolfbane left Genosha and had joined X-Factor right after Peter David had taken over the title. Now for Wolfbane, we actually see her knocked out thanks to the explosion of the battle between Havoc and the Hulk. Now here's the problem. You see, she's miles away from the rest of her team, and so she is founded by two people, a young man and his sister, and they pick her up and they take her away. And so we're kind of left to believe at first that maybe they're going to actually help her, give her some medical help. Now the rest of the X-Factor team, they don't realize that Wolfbane is gone. Matter of fact, they're looking for Havoc because Havoc was battling against the Hulk. And there was a huge explosion between those two characters. And so you have our heroes just trying their best to locate their missing friend. And that is the big problem for them at the moment. But then they realize the Pantheon group is attacking again, attacking the government army. And so unfortunately, our heroes had to stop looking for Havoc and go back into the battle against the Pantheons.
Now, I want to jump back over to Wolfbane. Here's the reason why. See, Wolfbane was actually found by a young man known as Joel and also his sister Sanda. Now, here comes the big problem. You see, for Joel, he's kind of wondering if Wolfbane is somebody that he can trust. And here's the reason why. He's one of the people who are technically being affected by the war between the resistance and also the government, but he's not on the side of the resistance. He's on the side of the government because he truly believes that Farnak is actually a good man, a godly man. And so because of that, he's wondering if possibly Wolfbane must be taken care of because she goes against his God. Now, here's something else I want to mention. He is the head of the household in his mind, which means that his sister has no right to say anything at all or tell us what she actually feels. And matter of fact, when she tries to speak up, he tells her to be quiet and only talk when he can talk. And that's really it. Now, for the X-Force team, they're still dealing with the Pantheon group, and so we do get a few more pages of those characters going against each other, and it's kind of cool to see that. But of course, Havoc's still missing, and Wolfbane still being held as a hostage. And the Hulk is not here at the moment because, well, he was battling against Havoc, and as we saw earlier with that huge explosion, now both characters had just disappeared. We don't know where they have exactly gone to. But yes, you still have the X-Factor team fighting against the Pantheon. Now, I want to skip over a few pages, and the reason why, because the book does kind of go back and forth between the whole idea of X-Factor fighting against the Pantheons and also Wolfbane being a hostage. So to save us some time, I want to go ahead and jump to the actual end of this video, the end of this chapter, because you do have Wolfbane almost breaking free from the binds that were put on her thanks to Joel. Now, she's also near the nearest battle between X-Factor and also the Pantheons. And that battle is really more Quicksilver fighting against one of the members of the Pantheons. Now, while she's trying to get away, Joel's sister actually helps out and begins to try to help her break free from the binds. But her brother gets very angry because remember, he is the head of the household. And so to him, you have to do whatever he says. And so once he sees his sister trying to help free Wolfbane, and he knows that Wolfbane is an enemy against his god, Farnak, you actually have Joel begin to harm his sister. And that makes Wolfbane very angry. And this is kind of the beginning process of us seeing her kind of turn into a wild animal, because she does go after Joel, killing him. Now, she is founded by Quicksilver, and when she is founded by Quicksilver, he picks her up and they run off to rejoin the rest of X-Factor. But for Quicksilver, he can tell that there's something wrong with Wolfbane, but she's not trying to tell him. But we as the readers, we now know there is something wrong with her. Now, this is not the first time that she actually gone wild and actually killed somebody being like a wild animal, but it has been a while since she done it last time in our coverage over the X-Men. But now it's time for us to wrap up this story as we jump back over to Hulk issue number 392, where we actually pick up with Havoc now being bound to some kind of device. Now, apparently, after the battle between him and the Hulk, he was found by some of the men who work for Farnak. And Farnak felt like he could use Havoc as a special kind of weapon because Farnak and his country have basically signed an agreement that they would not have any kind of nuclear weapons. But that actual contract did not say like, hey, you can use a powerful mutant as a powerful weapon. And so for Farnak, he's all like, hey, guess what? I'm going to use you against your will as a powerful weapon against my enemies. If anybody tries to stop me, well, hey, I now have you because I realize how powerful you truly are. Now, Val Cooper, the actual liaison, the person who works for the U.S. government but is being used as a way to represent X-Factor, well, she's also have been captured by Farnock. You see, earlier in the story arc, these two characters had drinks, Farnock and Val. And well, he slipped some drugs into her actual drink, which of course led to her being under his control. And so now Havoc seems like he might be in a very tough spot, because now the one person who's actually nearby is not really able to be in control of her own body. But after you have Farnock and also Val Cooper walk away, we do see that someone was able to sneak into the actual facility, and that would be the Hulk. And so now we know the Hulk did survive the battle between him and Havoc, which honestly, no surprise there. But Hulk was able to sneak his way into the actual facility. Now the question is Hulk going to help Havoc out here by breaking him free? Now, we also get reminded about Galvin, the CIA agent. And remember, he was there to kind of help out Farnock because the U.S. is the country's ally. And so the U.S. have been giving this country different kinds of weapons to use against the resistance. But here comes the big problem. You see, Farnock had crossed too many lines, and so for Galvin, enough is enough. It's time for him to step in and stop Farnock. The problem is Farnock stabs Galvin, killing him off. And he says, listen, with you out of my way, I am now able to continue on with my plans. And he just walks away. Now, all of that is happening inside the facility, but on the outside of the place, we actually see X-Factor still fighting against the Pantheons. And really, their battle goes back and forth for a couple of pages, but it kind of tells us that sooner or later, they're going to be really important when it comes to the end of this story arc. But for right now, they're outside just fighting against one another, while you have the Hulk and Havoc and Val Cooper inside the actual base of Farnock. But now we had to sit down and talk about the Hulk and Havoc's conversation, because for Havoc, he's kind of like, listen, Hulk, I understand what you are trying to do here. Like, yes, you know that Farnock is a horrible leader. You know that he should be removed. But here's the problem, though. What right do you have to jump into a battle between two different parties and make sure that your judgment is the actual right choice? Because you don't know actually what could happen if you do remove Farnock as the leader of this country. What if somebody else, even worse, steps into that actual role? Now for Havoc, it's him also kind of agreeing with the Hulk, saying like, yes, I know that Farnock is evil. I know he is a horrible man. But at the same time, you have to realize you are just one man trying to decide what should be done for an entire country full of people. What right do you have? But it's also Havoc saying, what's next for you then, Hulk? Like, if you stop this world leader, are you gonna go after other world leaders around the world when they make bad decisions as well? And yes, this is a huge bad decision, but what if other world leaders out there make smaller bad decisions? Are you and your team of the Pantheons are gonna go out to those countries and do the same thing you're doing right now in this country? Is Havoc saying you need to think about what you're actually doing here. But now I want to shift our focus back over to the battle between X-Factor and also the Pantheon, because their battle is getting very intense to the point where there is a character known as Argo, and Argo is driving a very special kind of vehicle to fight against X-Factor with. Now the problem is Strong Guy, he had absorbed a lot of energy, and we had talked about this before. You see, for Strong Guy, he does get stronger the more kinetic energy that he does absorb. But the problem is that if he absorbs too much kinetic energy, he has to let it go somehow by punching things out. And so we see Strong Guy just going at it on the vehicle that Argo is inside of, to the point where you have Strong Guy throw the vehicle across the battlefield and it crashes into a boulder. Now, when it does, it catches on fire and Argo is able to get out just in time. But the problem is you have Wolfbane find him. Now, she believes that he had been badly burned when she looks at his face. And let's not forget, in the last chapter, Wolfbane had just killed a guy because she went feral. But either way, when she looks at Argo, she's kind of like, oh my God, look at what we done to this guy. His face has been burned. Except his brother comes by and says, no, his face was always like that. But move, get out of the way so I can take my brother somewhere safe to get healed up. But now it's time for us to kind of wrap everything up. And so we do jump into Farnock's big plan. And we do learn that his big plan is to use different kinds of missiles to keep everyone in place, to make sure the resistance will stop trying to attack him and his army. Now, here's the catch. On every single missile, there's somebody actually tied to them. So for example, there are innocent children who are tied to those missiles, children who belong to parents who are part of the resistance. But also Havoc is one of the people who are also tied to a missile. Now, he's not going to shoot the missile that Havoc is on, but at the same time, he wants everyone to believe that he is not scared to use innocent people to stop the resistance from attacking him and his army. Now, to show off his power, he does fire 2 missiles that does have a young child and a mother on each one of those 2 missiles. Now, luckily for our heroes, the Hulk was able to save the child, and you have Polaris and Quicksilver work together to save the mother. Now you do have the Hulk being able to get over to Farnock and bring him out in front of all the different people of the country. Now for X-Factor, for the Hulk, for the Pantheons, they believe that the people are going to finally have justice. They're going to go ahead and kill off their own leader, except they don't. Instead, they bow down to him. And it kind of shows like, even though he has been a bad leader, even though he deserves to be removed as the leader of the actual country, the people are not really going to go ahead and take that next step because they were the ones who kind of put this man in that position, but some of them still look at him as some kind of god. Now, with that being said, you did have Rick Jones in a Mandroid suit shoot and kill off, well, Farnock. Just like that. Now, everyone is surprised that Rick Jones was the one who actually did it. But let's not forget that this man has been with the Hulk and the Pantheons and the Resistance the entire time. And he had heard so many different stories about what was happening to the people in this country. And so he knew if they could not finish the job, he had to be the one. And bam, just like that, Farnock is dead. And now it's time for this country to begin to have some, a new election to bring someone else in to be that leader.
What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to jump into some X-Factor. Now, it's going to be a 2-part story arc where we see X-Factor dealing with the Mutant Liberation Front. This is them kind of getting involved with the whole idea of Strife. Now remember, we only been seeing Strife over in X-Force because Cable has been trying to hunt that man down. We also know that Strife has the same face as Cable. Of course, we already know that he is the clone of Cable. Either way though, when it comes to X-Factor, they haven't really had the chance to actually deal with Strife up until this moment. But it's also X-Factor finding out that somebody else from their past is also alive again. And that would be Mr. Sinister. And so let's begin this 2-part story arc that takes place in issues number 77 and 78.
And so getting into the opening pages for today's video, we actually pick up with X-Factor issue number 76, where we actually pick up at a clinic. And we pick up with a guy known as Dr. Tucker. Now, Dr. Tucker, he was able to actually build a test that allow parents to find out if their baby is going to be a mutant or not. And that is really important for today's video, because now you are talking about the idea of having a way to slow down the mutant race, the growth of the mutant race. Because if you have parents out there who want to know if their child is going to be a human or a mutant, then that test is out there to tell them if their child is going to be one or not. And if you have parents who hate the idea of their child being a mutant, well, then they can have an abortion. And so it kind of goes into the whole idea of slowing down the growth of the mutant race, another way to actually attack the mutant race. Now, Dr. Tucker tells us that his actual test is not bulletproof. Like, it's only a 55% chance that their child might come out as a mutant. But that is a very huge chance at the moment for this couple. But now the question is, what would happen down the road if his test gets better, where he is able to easily find out if a baby is going to be a mutant or not? But now we jump over to X-Factor. Now remember, in an earlier story arc, you have the team had a run-in with the Nasty Boys. Now the Nasty Boys work for Mr. Sinister, but they were able to capture at least 2 members of that actual group. That will be Slab and also Hairbag. Honestly, those names still suck. Either way, those 2 characters are currently prisoners, and you have Wolfbane kind of checking in on them. But while doing that, out of nowhere, a random portal begins to open up. Now, before we're able to see what was inside that portal, we actually jump over to Val Cooper. Now, Val Cooper, let's not forget, she is the liaison for X-Factor, because remember, X-Factor is a government team for America, because the government is trying to build relations between the mutant race, but also the government as well. Now, we're also being introduced to a new character known as Vicky Wang. Now, Wang is really trying to be this big time public defender. Let me explain. So to her, she feels like even though bad guys do bad things, they still have the right to have an actual trial. Because usually if a hero stops a bad guy, that bad guy is instantly thrown into prison and locked away for a very long time until somebody's able to break them free. And so she's saying even though those 2 guys, Slab and Hairbag, had did some damage in an earlier story arc, they still have the right for a fair trial. But let's get back over to, well, Wolfbane, because remember, a portal opened up out of nowhere, and we kind of find out that it was actually the Mutant Liberation Front. Now, originally, when we had met this group of people, we were left to believe that their main goal is to go around the world to free mutants who are being held as prisoners by the governments of the world. But also, they're being controlled by Strife. Now for Strife, he wants to help out the mutant race, quotation marks, but he also has his own personal goal. But either way, they are currently here to free Slab and Hairbag. And so we get a big battle between X-Factor and also them. Now it's kind of funny because at first you have the actual group believe that X-Factor is X-Force, not knowing that this is actually X-Factor. And it kind of shows that X-Force had already at this point made a name for themselves, and so had Excalibur and the X-Men team. But for X-Factor, they're kind of the new team on the block by this point in Marvel Comics. Now, we actually jump over to a character known as Vic Chalker. Now, we actually met Vic a while back in X-Factor, and really, for this character, he only appears here and there in all the books. Like, he has a big plan to kill off the mutant race, or we're kind of left to believe he had a big plan. And here's the reason why I'm saying that. Because in our last video, we saw him trying to build this armor suit to use against the mutant race. But every single time he thought it was ready, something else had been done in the actual suit. Well, today, it's finally done. But then he realized it's going to storm. And so he said, you know what?
let me go ahead and go back inside and wait for the storm to pass. Unfortunately, he is hit by lightning, and when it happens, well, he gets shocked big time to the point where he is basically killed off inside his suit. Now, Cannonball, who's also part of X-Force, flies by, and to him, he thinks a statue, but in reality, there was a poor old man inside that suit who was just killed off by a bad storm. Now, Cannonball has a mission, which is to find X-Factor, to find Wolfbane. And really, getting back over to X-Factor, we actually see X-Factor fighting against the Mutant Liberation Front still. Now, their battle goes on for a few more pages, but you actually have the group use a mutant known as Zero to be able to open up a portal to allow them to actually escape. Now, for X-Factor, they're trying their best to stop them. And so you have Polaris try to use her powers on the actual group, except most of the bad guys are able to make it through. But Polaris powers does grab somebody. It's Strife, their actual leader. Now, he is being pulled back through the portal that Zero had opened up earlier, but now he's being pulled by both groups between this portal. Now, for our heroes, this is the first time they have actually met Strife, but they don't know his actual name yet. Now, after you have a good old tug of war on Strife's body, the actual bad guys are able to pull their boss back into the portal, back over to their side. But here's the catch. Wolfbane was able to get a smell on Strife, and to her, he smelled very familiar, kind of like possibly Cable. And so now for X-Factor, they're kind of wondering who in the world is that group. Now, after the whole battle, you do have the group meet up because they have to talk about what happened to Jamie Madrox in our last video. Not our last video, but a couple of videos ago. You see, when it comes to Jamie, he has the ability to make clones of himself. But one of his clones was actually recruited by Mr. Sinister for like 6 months. Now, once he was able to reabsorb that actual clone, he kind of learned a tad bit about what's happening with Mr. Sinister. Not a lot, but he's able to tell Havoc like, hey, this guy, Sinister, is alive again. Now for Havoc, he cannot believe that he's alive again because the last time we saw Sinister was back in X-Men Inferno, where Cyclops had killed him off. But apparently, the man is alive again, and that's pretty huge for all the X-Men teams. Now, I kind of want to jump back over to Wolfbane. Here's the reason why. So Wolfbane, in the last couple of videos, we kind of realized that something is off about her, especially with the idea that she's going to fall in love with Havoc. Now, let's not forget, Havoc is with Polaris, but for some reason, it does seem like Wolfbane is now very attracted to, well, Havoc. Now, for Polaris, she also kind of realized there's something else going on with Wolfbane. Now, if you've seen our last video, she killed a man. She went feral when she was in her wolf form, and that's pretty huge. Now, before she's able to explain what's happening to her, she's then grabbed by Cannonball. Now, this is the throwback because back in the early days of the 1980s for Marvel Comics, both Cannonball and Wolfbane were part of the New Mutants, but at the tail end of that run, you had different members of the New Mutants leave the team when Cable had taken over, and one of those characters was Wolfbane. Now, Wolfbane had rejoined X-Factor, not rejoined, but she did join a new team after leaving the New Mutants. But for Cannonball, he says that he has been watching her for a while, and he kind of realized there is something wrong with her. Now, no one is actually able to tell us what's wrong with her, but for Cannonball, he believes that she'll do better with people her own age, talking about joining X-Force. But the problem is, she does not want to leave at all. But for him, she has to because most of the members of X-Factor, they're older people. And for him, she does not fit in with the older crowd. Now, she tells him no, and you have Cannonball trying to force her to leave, and you do have Polaris use her power away to kind of stop him from making her leave. Now, she is able to convince him to leave her alone. Now, when Havoc walks out, he sees Cannonball. And let's not forget that around this time, X-Force is wanted because they have pulled off a lot of questionable things in Marvel Comics. But also, the word on the street is that they have also done some other things behind the scenes. So they're kind of wanted by the law. And with X-Factor being a government team, they have to bring in X-Force. But you have Polaris listen to Wolfbane because she said, no, we're not going to capture him. Let Cannonball leave. And so he does leave. Now for Havoc, he's kind of wondering, why in the world did they let him go? But for Polaris, she says because Wolfbane asked for it. Now, the last page of the book, we actually see the Mutant Liberation Front meet back up with their boss. And you have their boss inform them that they now have a new mission. And that new mission is to now attack that clinic we saw earlier on in this video. The one that had the test to figure out if your baby is going to be a mutant or not. And so getting into the opening pages for the next chapter, we actually pick up with the character known as Tempo. Now, Tempo has the ability to slow things around her. So for example, in a certain amount of area around her, things are able to slow down to a certain point of speed. So sometimes she is able to make people freeze completely in place or just slow them down far enough so that she's able to move faster than them. Now, we do see Tempo calling up Dr. Tucker, the guy who owns the clinic. Now, for me personally, I feel like this is her father. And here's the reason why. Her last name is Tucker. It's Heather Tucker. And his name is Dr. Tucker. Either way, she does inform him that his clinic is going to be attacked very soon by a terrorist group. Now, getting back over to X-Factor, you have Val Cooper introducing the team's own danger room. Now, for our heroes, they're not really excited about the idea of the danger room. And the reason why, because at this point in their lives, they truly know how to use their powers in the battlefield. They're mostly grown adults, but also they kind of feel like they should have been consulted when it came to the idea of designing the actual danger room. And for Havoc, he's wondering, what is the point of this? And you have Val Cooper say, well, the president and other people in the government feel like you guys need some training. And so the danger room sessions are going to be mandatory. Now, for our heroes, they completely ignore her and walk away. But the door is now open with the idea of X-Factor having their own danger room to use to make sure they're ready in the field. Now, you do have Strong Guy run into Vicky. Now, remember, Vicky Wang is supposed to be like, you know, this lawyer trying to help out bad guys who've been placed in prisons without actually having a trial. And she only came by here to kind of talk to Val Cooper, but we're kind of given the idea and the possibility that her and Strong Guy might become a couple because Strong Guy was flirting very hard there with her. Now, we also get another page where we do see Sinister stopping by the base of the Mutant Liberation Front to pick up the two guys who used to work for him, who were part of the Nasty Boys, so Hairbag and also Slab. It's a quick page, but it also tells us that Sinister and Strife are kind of working together here. Now, the problem is, though, what is their big plan? Because we have no idea what that plan truly is. Now, getting back over to Havoc, he does call up Charles Xavier and also Scott Summers to inform them that, hey, listen, Sinister is still alive. Now, for the X-Men and also X-Factor, they really can't believe that he is alive because, like I said earlier, we all were left to believe back in X-Men Inferno that Scott Summers had killed him off. To only find out now that no, he's actually alive and well. Either way, it's now the X-Men being on guard, and so is X-Factor. Now, you have Wolfbane thank Havoc for not telling the X-Men about Cannonball being here earlier, because remember, X-Force is actually outlaws at the moment, and neither X-Factor nor the X-Men actually respect what X-Force is doing. Matter of fact, the other two teams,
I say the other three teams, including Excalibur, they don't play ball with X-Force at all. And really, they're kind of hoping that sooner or later, that team right there will be officially shut down. Now, you do have Val Cooper walk into the room to inform everyone they do have a new mission. Now, their new mission is to, well, protect that health clinic we saw earlier. Now, the only reason why X Factor is getting involved is because the government is getting involved. And the only reason why they're getting involved is because that phone call from the very beginning of this chapter from Tempo, because she did say, hey man, listen, you are going to be attacked by a terrorist group. And so the government got involved and called in X Factor. Now, the team is actually informed about the test. The whole idea, the test has the ability to figure out if a baby is going to grow up as a mutant or as a human. And so for X Factor, some of the members of the team don't really like the idea of being involved protecting someone who could actually hurt the mutant race down the road, especially with that kind of test. But you do have the entire team go except for Quicksilver. Now, we're going to find out why at the very end of this book, but he does not go on this mission. Now, the next section is really more of seeing the Mutant Liberation Front arrive at the clinic. And when they do, they instantly attack Dr. Tucker. Now, he does survive, but he will die by the end of this chapter. Now, with that being said, you also have X Factor arrive to fight against the actual bad guys. And after a few pages, the battle does go back and forth, but now we got to shift our focus over to Wolfbane. And here's the reason why. So at the end of the battle, she finds the doctor and he's barely surviving. But when it comes to the doctor, what he did was he went ahead and told his computer to actually download the test onto a drive. And then he tells Wolfbane to give that drive over to the government. Now, we already know that she does not want to do that at all, because again, she's one of the members of X Factor who hates the idea of some kind of test being out there that could possibly hurt the mutant race down the road. And so after Dr. Tucker dies, you actually have Wolfbane tell the computer to abort the actual process of downloading the whole test onto the drive so that she can destroy it and nobody can find the actual test at all. No one can be able to actually build off of it and try to make a better version. Now, Polaris saw what she did, but at the same time, Polaris is not going to tell because Polaris also hated the idea of the test. Now, we do jump back over to the Mutant Liberation Front, where you do have Strife kind of confused on how in the world X Factor knew to be there at that clinic. And so this is him kind of wondering if he has a traitor in his group, which he does. It's Tempo. But for him, he's still kind of wondering who it could actually be. And we do see every single member, including Tempo, say, no, boss, we have no idea how they found out. Now, the last page of the book does explain why Quicksilver did not want to go on the next mission. Here's the reason why. Because of his daughter, Luna. You see, around his time in Marvel Comics, Quicksilver had a daughter with a woman known as Crystal, who's an Inhuman. The problem was, with the child's genetic makeup being half mutant, half inhuman, she unfortunately did not gain any mutant ability at all. It did seem like both sides of her genetics had canceled out each other, not giving her the chance to actually gain a power at all. And so for Quicksilver, it was him kind of being upset with the idea of his child being just a normal child, but then he realized that it's still okay if she was normal, or it was okay for her to be a mutant with powers or any human with powers. Either way, that is his daughter, and he should have been there the years that she had grown up without him. And so it's kind of Quicksilver realizing his mistakes of not really being there for his daughter, all because she had no powers, and kind of realized no matter what, he should have been there as her father because that is his job. But the
What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we're going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, but now it's time for us to jump back over to good old X-Factor. Now remember, by this point in Marvel Comics, X-Factor had completely changed because the original X-Factor was the original 5 X-Men coming together to try to carry on Charles Xavier's dream because they felt like the X-Men at that time was not actually properly doing that. And so after you had the original X-Factor team rejoin the X-Men, it left room for new characters to kind of replace them and also give us a new direction with that team. And so when it comes to this X-Factor, they work for the American government because the government is trying to build relations between the mutant race and the actual government of America. And so this X-Factor team, being led by Havoc, Alex Summers, is going on different missions given to them by the government. Now, today's video, we're going to cover a 3-part story arc that takes place in issues number 79, 80, and 81, where we do see our heroes being introduced to not really a new character in Marvel Comics, but new for them because this character so far only fought against Wolverine, and that's really it. Now, the opening pages to issue number 79 is going to be actually one of the 2 issues our heroes are going to have to handle in this 3-part story arc, where we do pick up with a elderly couple. Now, the wife of the couple, she goes into the living room to see what's taking her husband so long to come to bed, except when she goes over to the living room, she finds that her husband is dead, but also there is a mysterious woman outside the house who was looking in the window, watching the man just laying there dead on his couch. But now we can actually jump over to X-Factor properly, where we do see our heroes just having a good time, relaxing, but also this section is kind of used to give us some comedy in the book because you do have Jamie Madrox trying to play the piano, and unfortunately, he actually sucks at it. Now, Quicksilver, he believes that he's actually a better piano player, and so you actually have Quicksilver push Jamie off to show everyone that he can play the piano. Now, at first, he actually sucks, but then after a while, he's able to learn how to properly play the piano because he has heard Black Bolt, of course, the king to the Inhumans, play different songs every time Quicksilver had hung out with his ex-wife, Crystal. But either way, once he's able to learn how to play the piano, he's able to play a beautiful song for his entire team. Now, I want to jump back over to the mysterious killer we have in this book, and her name is Agrani. Now, that's her last name. We're going to learn her actual mutant name here in a moment, but we actually see her on the run because you did have that older lady tell the police that, hey, I found my husband, he's dead, and I saw her looking through our window. And so you have police trying their best to actually capture her, except when they try to get close to her, she begins to play music. And when she does, most of the officers around her are kind of put in some kind of trance. And so it's kind of like, okay, does she have the ability to play music and put people under her spell in some kind of way? Now, for our heroes, they do get word about what's happening over in that city involving that mutant. Now, they don't send the entire team over there. They only send really Quicksilver and also Jamie Madrox to go over there to figure out what is exactly going on with that mutant and what is she doing inside that city. Now, you do have Quicksilver and also Jamie arrive over in the city. Now, when they do arrive there, they're kind of being confronted by people who already hate mutants. And so once they got word that there was a mutant in their city who is causing problems like killing people, they got even more upset. And really, they were putting pressure on the police, wondering, what are you guys going to do with this mutant who's just wandering around and killing off people one by one? But also,
why is she even here? Now, once you have Quicksilver and also Jamie arrive, they're also being confronted by hatred as well. Now, here's the big thing. You see, you have Jamie trying to calm everyone down because they all need to work together if they're going to find the mutant and actually stop the mutant. But for Quicksilver, he does get upset with Jamie because to him, he said, listen, those people right there, they hate us. They hate our kind. And what I saw was you trying to please them. And that really did upset me. Instead of pleasing them, you should have went after them, gave them the riot act, because what they're saying about us is completely wrong. Now, for a brief moment, we actually have to jump over to Polaris. And reason why, because this is going to set up the second problem our heroes are actually going to go through. You see, you have Polaris out there just shopping in Washington, D.C., trying to find a good outfit to wear for an anniversary date with Havoc, except while walking around, she is then punched from behind by a mysterious person that tells her you should not protect Marilyn Maycroft. Now, that name is going to be really important in later chapters, but for Polaris, that one single punch did a lot of damage to her face and completely knocking her out. But now we can jump back over to Quicksilver and also Jamie. Now, this is where we begin to learn the actual name of the mutant in this story arc, and her name is Rhapsody. Now, Rhapsody's real name is Rachel Argosy. Now, for Rachel, she has the mutant ability where once she's able to play music, she gets a range of different kinds of powers. Now, in this story arc, really all story arcs, she only has two kind of powers. The first is being able to fly. But the other one, being able to play with people's emotions, being able to control their minds. Now, we do learn that apparently she is a late bloomer. And what I mean is that usually for mutants, when it comes to their powers manifesting, it usually happens when they go through puberty. But the problem for her was, well, it came when she was only 20, when she was a teacher. And so you did have the school she was at kind of freak out with the idea of her being a mutant. But once her powers came out, and again, once she was able to play music, she was able to gain different kinds of powers. So now we know her origin. Now, while you have Quicksilver, Jamie, and few other members of the government of this city trying to work together on how they're going to bring her down, you have our heroes get word that she's actually nearby, and once again, she's playing music. And of course, she's having different kinds of powers being shown to the public. And so you have our heroes rush over to hopefully stop her. Now, once you do have our two heroes actually arrive at the scene where Rhapsody is at, you do have our heroes trying their best to stop her. Now, I want to shift our focus onto Jamie. Here's the reason why. Because while you have Jamie trying his best to go after her and actually stop her, well, when she plays music, like I said earlier, she's able to play with people's emotions, play with their minds. And so what we are currently seeing is Jamie being forced to fall in love with her. And with him falling in love with her, well, he's no longer trying to pursue her, no longer trying to bring her down. Actually, he is pursuing her, but not in the way of trying to stop her and bring her in for the crimes that she had committed. Instead, it's really more of him trying to get with her. He's in love with her. Now, luckily for Jamie, Quicksilver was nearby to just jump in the air, grab her, take her down, and say, cool, everything is handled. Hey, Jamie, snap the heck out of it. Now, I want to jump back over to the base of X Factor for the ending of the first chapter, because we do learn the team does have another mission to actually handle. Now, of course, you're not going to have Quicksilver, nor Jamie, nor Polaris for this mission, but you do have Havoc find out that the team must protect a young woman known as Marilyn Maycroft. Now remember, Marilyn Maycroft is the same name we heard earlier when it came to Polaris just out there shopping, and she was hit from behind by a mysterious character who told her, hey, you should not protect this person at all. And that person just left after knocking out Polaris. Now, Havoc is learning this from Val Cooper. Now, remember, Val Cooper is in charge of X Factor. With the team being a government team, you need somebody from the government to kind of help run everything. Now, with all that being said, once you have Havoc learn the actual name of the person they have to protect, we learned that Marilyn actually used to work for a group known as the Hellbells. Now, the Hellbells used to work for the cartel, and apparently for Marilyn, she wants to testify against the cartel to bring some of them down. And so for the government, she needs to be protected because she is perfectly able to bring down a huge portion of the cartel. But once you have Havoc learn everything, that is when you have Wolfbane walk into the room to inform both Val Cooper and also Havoc that Polaris has been attacked. Now, as we jump into X Factor issue number 80, we really continue the whole idea that there is something wrong with Wolfbane. Let me explain. You see, ever since Peter David had taken over the actual X Factor title and brought in a new team, one of the things he did establish is that something is different about Wolfbane. The way she's acting, the way she's thinking, and really, we saw her being kind of weird towards Alex Summers as well. And so, in the opening pages of X Factor issue number 80, we actually see Wolfbane having this weird dream where her, Alex, and also Polaris are kind of like big time partiers, having a good time at some party at her place or possibly somewhere else. But in the middle of the party, they're then attacked by the Brood. Now, this could be a hint the Brood may have done something to her. We have no idea just yet. But then out of nowhere, she is woken up by Val Cooper. And once she is woken up, we do see that X Factor is currently at the hospital checking in on Polaris. And Polaris is going to be out for this mission because her jaw was almost completely broken. Like, they had a lot of things for her to fix her jaw, but she is able to tell the heroes what happened to her. But then you have our heroes realize that whoever attacked her for some reason does not want our heroes to protect Marilyn, the person they were just assigned to protect who could possibly help the government bring down a big portion of the cartel. And so now our heroes are wondering who attacked Polaris and what is their deal with Marilyn. But you do have our heroes kind of fill in the blanks for Polaris, but it's really more information we already know about. Now, let's not forget that Jamie and also Quicksilver are not there because they're handling a different problem, the whole Rhapsody problem. And so you have our two heroes still there because for Jamie, let's not forget, at the end of the last chapter, she was able to play music around him. And when she did that, she was able to get into his mind to control his emotions. He began to fall in love with her. And so because of that, he now kind of believes that him and Quicksilver have to help her out because one, she is a mutant, but two, he kind of feels like there's possibly more to the actual crime. What if she's actually innocent? And really, the way she is talking to Jamie and other people, she's gonna make it seem like, yeah, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm actually innocent. Like, you guys need to check in on the entire scene here because in reality, I could have been framed. But skipping back over to the Hellbell situation, we do see the other members of the Hellbells getting close to finding Marilyn, where we actually pick up with another member of their group, where they were able to get information from one of their informants. And after they're able to get that information of where they can find Marilyn, you then have them, well, kill off that informant to make sure that he does not warn Marilyn that they're getting close to finding her. We do know by this point she is being protected by X Factor. Now, I want to skip back over to Rhapsody because while she's in prison waiting for Quicksilver, but also Jamie to find a way to actually save her from being thrown in jail for a very long time, you do have one of the guards at her prison begin to play music. And again, once music is played near her, she's able to use that as a way to open up one of her abilities to kind of help her get out of tight situations. So it does seem like she was able to take the sound of music and use it as a invisible cord to kind of put the guard in a chokehold, or possibly go ahead and kill off the guard. But it kind of shows that there is something wrong with her, that every time music plays, she kind of does go on this killing path. Now, the rest of this chapter is really more of X-Factor, the ones who are there to actually protect Marilyn, be attacked by the Hellbells. Now, if you're wondering, hey, Fresh, have the Hellbells appeared before this actual book? No. This is their first appearance ever in Marvel Comics. So over the years, as we go through the X-Men and other titles, we're going to learn more about the actual group. All we know at this point is that Hellbells work for the cartel, and of course they're very upset the idea that Marilyn is trying to rat them out, and also their bosses as well. And so it does lead into a huge battle between them and also X-Factor. Now, I want to shift our focus over to Strong Guy. Now, guys, remember, Strong Guy has the ability to absorb kinetic energy. And when he does that, he's then able to get stronger. Now, the reason why I want to focus on him, because at the end of this chapter, he does get attacked from behind by a different person. Now, this other person is not really part of the Hellbells. Really, this person's kind of like their mentor. It's a character that goes by the name of Cypher. Sorry, Cyber, not Cypher. Cyber. Now, for Cyber, I don't really want to dive into his actual origin. And the reason why, because thanks to Marvel, over the years, they've tried their best to fix the origin of Wolverine. And so for Cyber, his origin is very close to Wolverine's origin. So I want to save his origin story for a later video. All you need to know right now is that his skin is completely covered in adamantium, the same kind of metal as on Wolverine's claws. But you do have Cyber being able to actually poison Strong Guy. And he tells Strong Guy, if you want to be cured of the poison, well, you're gonna have to hand over Marilyn. Now, our heroes are not really trying to do that, but if Strong Guy wants to live from the poison, he needs to tell X-Factor to give her over to the Hellbells, but also over to Cyber. But as we dive into X-Factor issue number 81, we do pick up with our heroes still continuing to fight against the Hellbells. Now for Strong Guy, he's actually calm for right now, but at the same time, he also realized that, well, one of the members of the Hellbells has a fire ability. And the reason why that's such a huge problem is because, well, she's near a boiler. And once she gets close enough to it, well, hey, the entire place, the entire hotel is going to blow up. They're at a hotel trying their best to hide Marilyn there, but unfortunately, the Hellbells and Cyber found out where X-Factor was trying to hide her. Anyways, you do have Strong Guy tell Havoc and Wolfbane to get everybody out of the hotel right now. And luckily they do, because right when everyone gets out, bam, the entire hotel does explode. And so it's kind of like, okay, cool. Now Cyber and the Hellbells, they had disappeared, but they're not done just yet. They still want Marilyn. Now, I want to jump back over to Jamie Madrox and also Quicksilver, because we're going to wrap up their whole situation with Rhapsody, because you do have Jamie finally realize that, one, she's a killer, and two, that she has been playing with him, because like I said earlier, once music's played around her, she's able to use music to unlock different kinds of powers she may have, like for example, controlling someone's mind, playing with their emotions. And so for Jamie, his emotions were being played with. She was able to kind of control him. And so once you have the two characters sit down and actually talk about what happened to the old man at the very beginning of this video, she does admit that she kind of did kill him off. Like, She was playing music, he loved it, but apparently he loved it too much, quotation marks, and his heart just exploded, or his heart just stopped. Now, we can kind of say that that could be one of her other abilities. We don't know yet. But either way, she does admit killing the guy and that Jamie got played, and you didn't have Quicksilver and him head back home to Washington, D.C. Now, I want to jump back over to the other members of X Factor. Here's the reason why. So, you have the other members of X Factor actually seeing that Strong Guy is very upset about being poisoned, which honestly, he has the right to be upset because you are talking about the possibility of actually dying because you were poisoned because your team was assigned to protect somebody else. Either way, for Strong Guy, he's kind of down with the idea of handing Marilyn over to the Hellbells because to him, he's all like, what's the point? She is a drug dealer or a drug pusher. She may have stopped, but hey, guess what? We don't know that sooner or later down the road, she might go back into that role. But it's also him saying, even if we do protect her, even if we are able to possibly find an antidote to kind of save my life, what happens after we do save her? Because there's still other people out there who are selling drugs. There's still other people out there who are able to push the drugs around the world. Now for Havoc, he also takes a poison as well that's very similar to Strong Guy to kind of say, listen, Val Cooper was able to find a doctor who was able to make an antidote to help you out. I took the poison to show you that even though I understand why you're freaking out, you have to understand why we're doing this for. But you also have to trust the doctor here who has a cure for your poison. But also you must realize we have to do the right thing. And the right thing is to protect Marilyn from the Hellbells and take them down, including Cyber. Now for Peter David, he does a great job in setting everything up to come down the road. Let me explain. So we jump over to a ship that is arriving into America. Now this ship was not cleared to actually dock in America. And really, you do have the government forces arrive and say, hey ship, we have no idea where you came from, but you can't come here. Like you did not get all cleared out to dock in America. You must go back into the ocean. But then the ship docks and somebody comes out and his name is Prodigal. Now Prodigal is going to be part of a new group we're going to see here in our next X Factor video. But for right now, all we know is that him and his people had apparently left a country and they were trying to find a new country to call home. But the problem was though, 4 other countries had told them, no, you cannot stay here. Like, go ahead and leave. And so they were kind of hoping to come to America and call America their new home. Now, the rest of the book is really more of our heroes fighting against the Hellbells and also Cyber. Now, for Cyber and Hellbells, they truly believe that there should be okay because they believe that Strong Guy is still poisoned. They have no idea that Strong Guy was able to find a cure to get rid of the poison. And so when they do arrive at first, they kind of pretend that he is still poisoned. But then in the middle of the fight, they do reveal that no, he is perfectly okay. And you have X Factor being able to take down Cyber, but to also take down the Hellbells. Now, this wraps up this 3-part story arc, but for X Factor, the job is not done yet, of course, because they are a government team. Sooner or later, they're going to have another mission they're going to have to handle. But this What's going on there, YouTube? Welcome back to another comic book video. Okay, so we are going to continue our coverage over the X-Men, and now we are going to jump over to some X Factor comics. Now, we're going to cover a two-part story arc that takes place in X-Factor issue number 82 and issue number 83. Now, with this two-part story arc, it is going to be the last video we're going to do for X-Factor before we properly jump into the X-Cutioner song, the next big crossover that we have to talk about on my channel. Now, today's two-part story arc is going to introduce a new team, but for me personally, I felt like Marvel could have done so much more with this team, and this team is called the Ex-Patriots. Now, before we are able to properly dive into today's video, there are some things we have to talk about. Like, for example, what happened at the end of our last video for X-Factor? You see, at the end of our last video, you had this cargo ship arrive in America. Now, we did learn that in that cargo ship, it was a group of mutants who had apparently left Genosha. Now, I'm going to talk more about Genosha here in a moment, but for right now, I kind of want to focus on this group of mutants because they had left their home country and they went to other countries around the world to hopefully find a new home, hoping to have a better life than they did back in Genosha. And so the problem was every other country besides America had told them no. And so when they had arrived in America, they were like, hey, listen, we came here hoping to find a new home. Will you accept us? Now, because the way the actual government system works, what they are doing is the incorrect way of coming into a new country and trying to become a citizen in the new country. And so you have the American government saying, no, you can't just come in like that. You have to leave. But they don't want to leave. And this brings in X-Factor. And so while you have the American government right now just waiting outside the cargo ship, waiting for X-Factor to arrive, you do have a few soldiers who are there to watch the place begin to talk about the whole entire situation. But while they are talking, they have no idea that they have somebody listening in, and that would be Sauron. Now, Sauron was a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants around this time in Marvel Comics, because around this time, you had Toad say, you know what? Because Magneto nor Mystique is leading their own version of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, it gave room for him to finally take that charge and become a leader for once. Because over the years in Marvel Comics, Toad was always Magneto's lackey. And so it's Toad trying his best to make a name for himself. And so for Sauron, when he overhears that there is a group of mutants inside that cargo ship, he knows that he needs to call up Toad because those group of mutants might become very helpful for Toad when it comes to building up his actual army of mutants. Now, I want to jump back over to the main base of X-Factor because I want to shift our focus over to Havoc and also Val Cooper. And here's the reason why. So for Havoc, he was the actual leader of X-Factor when it came to Marvel Comics at this time. And you see, when it came to this version of X-Factor, they worked for the American government because the American government's main goal was to build relations with the mutant race. They wanted their own superhero team that was full of mutants. Now, for Val Cooper, she was the liaison. And so for Havoc, the only thing she's really allowed to do is kind of give them missions, and that's really it. And report back to her bosses. And again, that's really it. But you have Val Cooper kind of trying to discipline different members of the actual team. Like, for example, trying to discipline Jamie Madrox for what happened in our last video. Now, in our last video, when it came to Jamie, he kind of fell in love with a mutant and caused a lot of problems for that mission. But honestly, when it came to that mutant, she had the power to play with people's minds when she played music. Matter of fact, check that video out. But when it came to Jamie, he did cause a lot of problems in that town where the mission was at. And so for Val, she's kind of upset. But for Havoc, he says, you don't have the right to talk to my team like that. Like, your only job here is to watch over us, talk to us here and there about some things, and then report back to your boss and then leave. Now, you do have Val Cooper wanting to argue with Havoc, but the phone rings, and that means they have another mission.
Now, something else we do have to talk about will be about Polaris. You see, when it came to Polaris, in our last video, she got seriously injured by a character known as Cyber. Her whole jaw was broken. Now, this is her coming home after leaving the hospital, being almost completely healed up. Now, I really want to focus more on Wolfbane here. And the reason why, because you have Wolfbane being very excited to see Polaris. And that's kind of weird. And really, for Peter David, he has been telling us that Wolfbane has been acting weird the entire time. Her emotions are all over the place. But also we know that she has some kind of attraction for Havoc. And really, you have Peter David remind us in this section right here, because with Polaris being home, Wolfbane is really happy, but she's not happy because, oh, Polaris back. She's only happy because, well, Havoc will be happy because his girlfriend is back home. And so for Wolfbane, if he's happy, then she's happy. Now, we do get a page to tell us that the character better known as Shrew was actually able to go through her trial. If you saw our last video, you saw that the character known as Shrew was someone who used to work for a group of characters known as the Hellbells. Now, the Hellbells and also another character known as Cyber used to work for a cartel. Now, here's the thing. When Shrew got arrested, she agreed to turn over evidence against her previous employer, the cartel. The problem was the Hellbells and Cyber and the cartel did not like that at all. So in our last video, they were trying to kill her off. But our heroes, X-Factor, were able to protect her, and she has gone through her trial, and everything's done with this character. And we're not going to see her ever again. But now we can sit down and actually talk about Genosha. Now, Genosha was created by Chris Claremont. It was a country in the world where they were trying to paint this perfect picture saying like, hey, listen, if you come here, it's Paradise Island for you. You'll get everything you need. You'll have no worries. But in reality, if you were a mutant in that country, you were turned into a slave to help build up that country up. And so a lot of times, if you went there and they found out that you were a mutant, bam, instantly you were a slave for that country. But if you were a human, you were good. You had the perfect life in this supposed perfect country. Now, when it came to the X-Men, it did lead into a big event called the Extinction Agenda that involved the New Mutants at that time, X-Factor and the X-Men going to war against Genosha. It was one heck of a crossover, but by the end of that crossover, Genosha was now trying to build up a new kind of country, a new kind of government that will allow both humans and mutants to live in harmony without any kind of idea to turn mutants into slaves. And so when it comes to the Ex-Patriots, the group of mutants who had arrived in America, they have no idea that what happened in their country. They still believe that mutants back in that country are, well, unfortunately slaves. And so when they hear some guy telling them like, hey, first off, you can't stay here. But two, I guess you haven't heard, but your country is actually a better place for mutants now. It got a whole lot better after you had left. But they don't believe that. But then that leads into Toad arriving with his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, for our new characters, the Ex-Patriots, they don't really understand what Toad means as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, especially the word evil, because you have Toad trying to play off the idea like, hey, you guys should join us. Like, we are a cool group. We're trying to do great things for the mutant race. But the whole idea of the word evil is kind of like, I don't think we should actually join you. Now for Toad, he says, listen, the reason we're called the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is because, well, the human race looks at mutants as evil creatures, evil characters. And so that is why we say the word evil mutants. But in reality, we're not actually evil. Now, you didn't have Quicksilver arrive. And let's not forget, when it came to the early days of X-Men comics, when it came to the early days of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they were being led by Magneto. And Quicksilver was on that team. And so he knows Toad very well. And like I said earlier in this video, that for Toad, he was a character where most people looked at him as Magneto's lackey or a lackey for somebody else, never that person who was able to take charge. And so for Quicksilver, it's kind of funny to see Toad being that person now in charge of an actual group. But you have Quicksilver believe that he should be able to take down the entire group by himself. Unfortunately, he cannot. But lucky for him, X-Factor arrived just in time to actually help him fight against the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, at first, we do see our heroes actually struggling when it comes to fighting against the different members of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. And really, it's for the way the book continue on and kind of give us a good battle. But don't worry, by the end of the book, or this chapter, our heroes are going to win. But before we are able to actually jump into that winning moment, we have to shift our focus over to Wolfbane, and here's the reason why. You see, for Toad and his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, they actually first appeared back over in X-Force comics. Now, when it came to Toad's Brotherhood, they fought against X-Force, and you had Sauron kill off Cannonball, quote unquote kill off, because we have learned that there is a possibility that Cannonball is an external. Now, an external is a very special group of mutants that have the ability of immortality. And so for Cannonball, at first, everyone thought he had died, but in reality, he was able to come back to life. But for Sauron and the Brotherhood, they still believe that they had killed him off. And so you have Sauron kind of telling Wolfbane that Cannonball is dead. And for Wolfbane, that's a huge problem because her and Cannonball are very close friends. They were both part of the New Mutants together. And so she does get very upset and tries to literally bite the neck off of Sauron. But he does drop her, and you do have other heroes go out of their way to hopefully save her. Now, the rest of the book is really more of having X-Factor being able to defeat the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. For me personally, they do a better job than X-Force did. But at the same time, for Peter David, he's trying to move on with this actual story arc because they got to get ready for the next big crossover between all the different X titles, minus Wolverine and also Excalibur. But either way, you do have our heroes being able to easily take down the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Now, to kind of wrap up the first chapter with our heroes being able to get rid of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, now they can shift their focus over to, well, the Ex-Patriots and what to do with them. Now, like I said, the Ex-Patriots, they don't believe that Genosha has become now a better place for mutants. And so for Havoc, he says, you know what? I got a good idea. X-Factor is going to take you guys back over to Genosha to actually show you guys that yes, it did become a better country. And the rest of the team cannot believe what Havoc had just said. But as we go into X-Factor issue number 83, the opening pages of this book, we do see some members of X-Factor and the Ex-Patriots being interviewed by some reporters. Now, I kind of want to focus on Lucas here. He's one of the members of the Ex-Patriots. And the reason why, because, well, Lucas is a telepath. He's able to read your mind, except he can only learn about what your fears are. And then once he does learn about your fears, he's then able to change his body into the things you're actually scared of. So for example, if you're scared of clowns, well, hey, he will change forms into an actual clown that's really scary to scare you. And so for Lucas, when it came to the reporters, he got tired of all the questions that they were asking. And so he changed his form into different creatures to scare them away. But you did have two characters arrive, and that would be Jenny Ransom and Philip Moreau. Now, these two characters were part of the early days of the whole concept of Genosha. Now, for Jenny, at first, she had no idea that she was a mutant, but later on, she had learned that she was. And when she did find out, the government also found out as well, and turned her into a slave. Now, the reason why I'm bringing that up because thanks to Jennifer and also the X-Men and Philip as well, they kind of begun the whole change in Genosha. But these two characters, they were able to go over to America and actually stay there. And once you have the different members of the Ex-Patriots over here, that these two characters who are also from Genosha were actually able to stay in America without any kind of problem. They want to know what had changed. Now, before we are able to understand what the actual change was, you then have Lucas realize that Philip's last name is Moreau. And the reason why that's such a huge problem is because, well, Philip's father was the man in charge of the entire process that turned mutants into slaves in Genosha. And for Lucas and the rest of the members of the Ex-Patriots, well, really just Lucas, he's kind of like, your father is the reason why we had to leave our country. He's the reason why we're trying our hardest to find a new place to live, a better place to live, because your father did some horrible things to us. And so for Lucas, he wants to attack Philip. But shifting our focus over to Wolfbane, we see her inside the cargo ship where we see other mutants who are also brought alongside with the Ex-Patriots who are trying to find a new home, a better country to live in. And so you did have Wolfbane run into a statue that looks just like Saran. Now, for Wolfbane, she was able to easily get rid of the statue, but at first she thought it was actually Saran. But once she had destroyed the statue, she realized it wasn't him. But also we learned that that statue was actually created by another mutant known as Taylor. Now for Taylor, he has the ability to make physical flames and turn those flames into statues. And so for Wolfbane, what she saw earlier was not really Saran, it was flames turned into a statue that was created by this mutant named Taylor. Now for Taylor, he's one of the few mutants outside of the actual Ex-Patriots group that was brought here to America hoping to find a new home. But for Wolfbane, she kind of wanted to hear his life story, so he begins to tell her. But getting back over to Havoc, trying to convince the rest of the team to go over to Genosha as a way to escort Ex-Patriots back there, but to also show the Ex-Patriots like, hey, things have gotten better in that country. You then have Val Cooper walk in. And this leads into another argument because for Val Cooper, she still believes that she's in charge of the entire team. And she says, no, you are not going to leave this country to go back to another country without my or the government permission. Now for Havoc, he's kind of like, hey, I'm not going to listen to you at all. But you then have Quicksilver kind of point out the idea that she can never understand what mutants go through because she's not a mutant. Now for Val Cooper, that's not fair because to her, mutants go through the same kind of struggles as regular people do. But in reality, they don't. Now, before this actual conversation go on, you then have Havoc realize something's happening outside the actual cargo ship. And once you have everyone go outside, they realize that Lucas had connected his mind into Philip's mind and turned into the character known as Cameron Hodge. Now remember, Cameron Hodge was this big time character who was trying his best to get rid of mutants across the board. And matter of fact, he was the leader of a group called The Right. But I'm not really going to dive too far into the actual idea of Cameron because he's not really important for today's video. All you know is that Lucas did turn into Cameron Hodge when he was that cyborg creature. But after a couple more minutes, you then have Havoc use his powers to knock Lucas back into his regular form again. Now, after all of that, you didn't have Havoc say, you know what, I got the best idea. Let's take the Ex-Patriots out into the actual city to kind of show them what America is truly like. Now, for Val Cooper, that is a bad idea. She's kind of like, no, these guys are technically illegal immigrants. You can't just walk them around the city without any kind of problem. But for Havoc, he says, listen, if you try to stop me, I'm gonna quit. If I quit, the rest of the team is gonna quit. And there goes your X Factor team, a mutant team working for the American government. And so she kind of realized that Havoc kind of has her in a tight spot right now. And so, unfortunately for her, she has to agree and to allow him to actually take the Ex-Patriots out into New York to give them a small taste of America. But now we have to jump over to the joke of the book, and that would be Rick Chalker. Now, Rick Chalker was the brother to Vic Chalker, and Vic Chalker was seen in the earlier parts of our coverage over Peter Davis' X Factor. You see, when it came to Vic Chalker, he had a huge hatred towards the mutant race, and he was trying his best to find different ways to actually kill off the mutant race. Now, unfortunately for Vic, he died, and the word of his death got over to Rick Chalker, his brother. And so for Rick, he's trying his best to avenge his brother, even though it was his own brother who got himself killed. It was not a mutant. Either way, for Rick, he had turned his hands into blades, or fans with very sharp blades. And so his goal is to go out there to actually kill off some mutants. The problem is, well, he got himself locked inside his actual lab. And with no longer having a finger to press buttons to get out of the actual lab, he's stuck in there. And when he goes to, give himself a slap in the face for messing up on making sure he had a way out of his lab, well, the blade in his hand cuts his head off. And so he died. So there goes Rick Chalker just like that. Now we're going to go ahead and skip to the end of this book. And the reason why, because the rest of the book is really more just X Factor going out of their way to, show different members of the Ex-Patriots what America is like by doing different kinds of activities. But I kind of want to jump back over to Wolfbane, Jamie Madrox, and also Taylor, the mutant that Wolfbane found earlier that has the ability to create physical fire. Either way, when it comes to Taylor, he's in the park trying to create some more statues with his powers, except for the humans in the park, they believe that it's Taylor trying to burn down the actual park. And they also realize that he is a mutant. And so you have Taylor, unfortunately, get beat down like severely beaten by a group of humans. Now, luckily for Taylor, you have X Factor arrive, and they were able to scare off those humans. But the book kind of ends with Taylor just laying there. Now, he's not dead, but he is severely injured. And this kind of ends today's video because the next time we're going to see X Factor, we're jumping into the X-Cutioner song, the huge crossover between X Factor, X-Men, Uncanny X-Men, and also X-Force. But with that being said, this is where we are going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.